Hello, so in this video I wanted to talk about evolutionary psychology. So I love science, I love the basics, biology, chemistry, physics, earth science, astronomy and such. And I had a lot of interest in natural history, cosmology, the theory of evolution. In my school years I studied psychology. I maintained nearly perfect grades in the sciences throughout my school years. But yeah, I really got into the theory of evolution. It used to kind of frustrate me a little when I was younger, when people didn't understand evolution. They had a poor understanding of the science, because I just thought it was so amazing, thinking about how we exist and how we got here. People would say things like evolution is just a theory, or they would mock the idea of humans coming from monkeys, like it was a ridiculous idea, that sort of thing. And that's true that evolution is just a theory, but the term theory is used differently in the scientific field than maybe you would in like a casual conversation. So in science, a theory has standards, certain criteria to be met. If you remember middle school science, if you remember the scientific method, otherwise an idea would be at the level of a hypothesis. So yeah, a scientific theory is a facts, evidence supported explanation for observations of the natural world. You might want to think of like a court case kind of in the same way. Sometimes they don't know what exactly happened, so they have to go off of evidence to make their case. But yeah, with the theory of evolution, there is a lot of evidence pointing towards it, short of taking a time machine back in time and seeing what exactly happened. We have the fossil record. We can observe adaptations to the environment. Like in the Arctic, a lot of the animals have white fur to evade other prey or predator animals. We can look at similarities in DNA between the species. We can look at embryos. We can look at vestigial organs in humans, such as the appendix, the tailbone, wisdom teeth, or like how snakes have appendage bones, for example. And people would misunderstand the mechanisms of evolution. Like they would be like, well, I believe in microevolution, but not macroevolution. Microevolution and macroevolution aren't actually mechanisms of evolution. They're just scientific terms to explain observations, but actually what is happening is a continuum. So or like people would be like, I don't believe that one species can give birth to another species, or I don't believe that one species can turn into another species. So yeah, I don't know if these people were trolls or if they just really didn't understand, but yeah, that's not what is meant by macroevolution. Macroevolution is just an observation when you're looking at a timeline. Evolution happens by microevolution, but eons of microevolution eventually turns into macroevolution. So yeah, it wouldn't be that one species is just giving birth to another species. No, that's not what happens. So yeah, I mean, evolution can happen episodically, or it can occur very gradually over hundreds of thousands of years, or or whatever. Yeah, it just depends on the environmental pressures. But yeah, theory of evolution is just a bit more complex than what I was seeing people making it out to be. I don't really care now. I can see both ways. And yeah, a lot of this had to do with people believing in religion and stuff. I don't think that science and religion is mutually exclusive. Me personally, I lean more towards scientific understanding of things. So anyway, within the last couple of years, people have taken more interest in evolution, and I was like, cool. But then I saw it mostly being used in this very hyperbolic way, like a bigoted way. I kept saying like evolutionary psychology, and I was like, that's it, that's what it is. I was seeing people use evolutionary reasons to make these crass claims about human behavior, mostly dating and relationships. So yeah, this was online blogs, YouTube, and such. The rationale I was seeing was the same as like the oversimplistic mocking of monkeys turning into humans, except people were actually buying into it. And actually, by the way, humans did not evolve from monkeys. They evolved from apes. Humans are a part of the great apes family. And no, not the extant apes today, but a common ancestor that we morph from. So yeah, anyways, now that we got that out the way. Do I think evolutionary psychology has merit to it? Of course, but as far as psychology at different points of our evolution and how it could have played out is just one piece of the puzzle. If you think about it this way, our genes actually have no idea what reality we're coming into. They're, inanimate, so an aspect of evolution is adaptation and malleability. So I have an inkling that culture and socialization has more of an effect than the premise of evolutionary psychology. But yeah, a root to this would be evolutionary psychology. So a lot of how I've seen evolutionary psychology represented misses the mark. The idea that our genes determine and control our behavior, I don't find convincing. A lot of this is just cultural and social influences that are misunderstood or misinterpreted as having a genetic basis. Evolutionary psychology and social psychology both explain human behavior, but that doesn't mean they both explain it to the same extent. Nature and nurture interact with each other. Humans are a product of evolution. The theory of evolution applies to how our brains operate. Aspects of our behavior is a product of evolution and our habitats and conditions in the past. These adaptations affect our thoughts and behaviors today. But the problem herein lies that evolutionary psychology consists of a lot of overstated claims. Not much is known about our prehistoric ancestors and how they lived and behaved from day to day. Evolutionary psychology is very reductionist. It's oversimplistic to say that there is a gene for certain behavior. It's hard to claim that such behavior is inherent rather than a product of socialization. The idea is humans are born with innate psychological mechanisms. These psychological mechanisms have a genetic component which makes them subject to evolution. So yeah, this makes sense on a level that can be applied to many other species. Like if you see a big scary monster, you're probably, gonna scream or try to run and hide. Where evolutionary psychology loses credibility with me is where it makes sweeping claims about human social behavior. I mostly seen this with like dating and mating and relationships, but yeah, the human brain is very complex. The prefrontal cortex is very complex. It allows humans to make decisions based on their own values. With evolutionary psychology, there's more of a focus on psychological mechanisms and not the behavior itself, which downplays culture and social influences. Behavioral level is not set in stone, so it's difficult to predict as a generality. There's a complex interplay with genes, culture, environment. Evolutionary psychology disregards our ability to generate insight. Specific changes to our thought processes occur in response to environmental and personal experiences. With evolutionary psychology, it does sound like that we are predetermined to behave a certain way as if humans have no willpower, which is not accurate. With evolutionary psychology, everything is an adaptation. Everything is subject to evolution. with the theory of evolution, that is not the claim. There are other factors at play. We have the main mode of evolution, which is natural selection, where adaptations come about. Adaptations aren't the only product of evolution. The evolutionary process produces byproducts. Chance, genetic variations, most of it is neutral. There's genetic drift, non-adaptive mutations that are not subject to natural selection, genetic changes that can be passed on for no adaptive reason, not advantageous but not detrimental in the long run either, and thus simply carry on in the human genome. With the combination of genes, creates variation that is different from each parent and adds a lot of diversity to the gene pool. It results in variation that natural selection can act upon if the environment calls for it or remain stagnant in the gene pool. Some traits may be far more beneficial, some less beneficial, some more harmful, some neutral, some useless. Okay, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So the main theme I've seen with evolutionary psychology is this animalization, this reducing human beings to their biological function. So yeah, it's a big theme, like reducing women's attractiveness to biological function. So yeah, there's a hyper focus on gender differences. Like, I remember seeing a clip of Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about makeup. He was talking about how women put on red lipstick and blush because they want to look flush, like they're making love or something like that. So basically, they just want to be attractive. They want to be sexually attractive to the opposite sex. And yeah, I think a part of, looking attractive and everything is to be attractive to the opposite sex. Maybe if you're looking to date, looking for a relationship, or to your partner, sometimes we like to be attractive to the opposite sex. Yeah, as far as wearing makeup and getting dressed up and stuff like that, for me, I like brown makeup, I like earthy tones, like what does that mean? That, I'm trying to make myself look like the color of clay or dirt, I mean, I don't think it means much. It's just an aesthetic that I like, I like to create an aesthetic that feels earthy or worldly. Like when I go out, I like to get dressed up, put on a little bit of makeup, because when I think back, it's a better memory. For me, I'm like, oh, I was wearing this color makeup scheme, I had this on. It just makes the memory better, rather than if I just go out looking frumpy. So yeah, and it's nice to look presentable and create an aesthetic, for other people as well. I mean, not just for the opposite sex and those reasons, but just to look nice and presentable. So yeah, with evolutionary psychology, they come up with these sorts of reasons for why women present themselves in certain ways and behave in certain ways in regards to dating and relationships. To me, it doesn't add up in a lot of ways. It's like we're not respected in our ability to understand the ongoings of our life, why we make the choices that we make, and the cause and effect of it all. Like, it all comes down to our prehistoric ancestors and how they lived that have nothing to do with us today. Like, they'll say that women don't like broke men, they like rich men to provide for children. Well, I don't think many people want to be broke. I think that's just objective reality that doesn't have much to do with our prehistoric ancestors, except for being conscious beings that experience reality. Like, I remember reading this article about sexual assault. It was about sexual assault being biological for men to pass on genes. They're pointing out that, sexual assault victims tend to be younger women, like 18 to 25. They're trying to say this is because, that's the age range that men are most attracted to. So, yeah, it has to do with, biology, reproduction, that sort of thing. So, like, there's more balanced ways to look at this data, like, rather than like this staunch objectification of women and reduction to biology. Younger men who are 18 to 25 are much more likely to engage in crime, and their peers tend to be the victims as well. So yeah, the article was trying to say that younger women are more likely to be the victims of sexual assault because men are biologically more attractive to younger women. So men are more likely to sexually assault women they're most attracted to. That seems like you don't really respect that person, in my opinion. And the thing with younger women, I can speak from my experience. I was a lot more, naive and vulnerable. You're more social when you're younger, usually. For most people, when you get a bit older, you usually have, more solid relationships, or maybe you're in a long-term relationship, you're not as social, you don't, you have more street smarts, so you're not as vulnerable. So, just, this sort of thing, trying to twist things in these sort of staunch ways. So, yeah, with evolutionary psychology, there seems to be this intertwining of prehistory and modern times, and it's often set up to the subjugation of women and to the benefit of men, or in a way where men are outside of the equation. For instance, there's a lot of talk about women and reproduction and fertility, which, I don't know, to me it's kind of weird and gross for a man to be talking about. Anyway, the theme seems to go that women are most fertile from teen years to mid-20s, so that's when they should have children. But what often seems to be left out is that the same theme goes for men as well. A man's testosterone decreases every year from the time he is 20, and fertility goes down faster around late 30s than for women, which wanes around 40, but then I'll be faster thereafter. That's just the nature of being a warm-blooded mammal with a high metabolic rate. You bud, you bloom, and then you wilt. That probably would have served well in prehistoric times. The goal of evolution is reproduction. So, yeah, it would have been advantageous to have kids early on. Times were more perilous for our ancestors, and the time period and region they evolved and developed. But in modern times, we aren't as subject to evolution. Things are more stable, there's more safety, there's not as much lurking danger, we have hospitals, medical care, etc., etc. So there's not much selective pressure to have children right away. There's actually more of the opposite. Like we aren't in natural prehistoric environments, but with evolutionary psychology, there's an expectation for women to live as if we're in prehistoric times, but men are allotted to live as on modern terms as far as being modern protectors and providers. So the idea is that men who are not in their prehistoric prime can get women who are in their prehistoric prime. So, yeah, they can be more financially stable, provide a house, money, things of that nature. So, yeah, this is more of a, this is a modern phenomenon, money being, status and such. in prehistoric times, humans would have been more subject to the laws of physics, so to speak. So yeah, younger man is going to be more able-bodied to build, provide, and protect. So yeah, in prehistoric times, humans aged faster due to the harder nature of living. They didn't live as long, The reason why we live longer now is due to advancements in science, medicine, easier nature of living. So yeah, I think we need to look at, modern life in that frame more than the frame of, prehistory. So yeah, it is true that older men can father children. It's not very common, but sperm quality does decrease with age. And yeah, many people born to older parents are perfectly healthy. But if we're talking about, in the context of, evolution long term, that's when that would become relevant. And as far as women, they're born with a couple million eggs. This system is not very efficient. This is probably some, crossover from like when we were a fish or some type of creature. But yeah, there's no way for a human female to use that many eggs. So I guess that's why, evolution didn't deem it that important. The time period we were, developing in, and in the region, it was quite rough, as far as evolution. But yeah, we have the intelligence to make up for it, but we weren't that long-lived. So yeah, there wasn't a reason to actually keep all of the eggs. So they do start dissipating. We were probably out in the savannah, exposed to predators, and then there was the ice age, and then our form. It's not as competent as going up against other animals. It's not as competent as going up against like saber-toothed tiger. So we developed intelligence instead. We developed tools. We figured out things using our brains. As opposed to our cousins maybe stayed in the warm jungles. Maybe it was easier for them in the trees or something like that. But yeah, human females are born with a couple million eggs. We don't have the ability to make new eggs. I'm guessing there wasn't evolutionary pressure to use energy on doing that. Whereas for men, they did retain the ability to make new sperm. So yeah, I think the way that we should look at this is, through a scientific way, like where women can retain eggs, so if they want kids later in life, because yeah, women do run out of eggs, in later life. But then there's also, the age thing, because pregnancy and childbirth is very difficult on the body, no matter what age someone is. Humans lose strength as age, If you look at the Olympics, the average age of retirement is 33. I think there's ways, for humans to, try to retain that, at least until 40. But yeah. But my point is that some things with biology aren't synced up. Some things are just, they happen by random chance. With evolutionary psychology, they like to claim, that younger women are more fertile. But, a teenager, has twice the risk, with a pregnancy for the mother and the baby than an older woman than, in her 40s. And yeah, women's fertility does go down slightly with age, not as much as claimed, until about 40, and then there's, more of a drop off. But yeah, another part of that is is because women are with men who, they're usually with men who are around their age, are older, and a part of that is that men's fertility goes down with age, as well. So yeah, say if you have a woman who's 35 and she's with a man who's 40, then yeah, she's going to have a lower fertility rate than if, you know, she's 35 and she's with a man who's 30. So yeah, there's this appeal to nature, this naturalistic fallacy. Something that is natural is healthier, better, more virtuous. This idea that the way things were in the past are the way things should be. And I've seen this in different ways with like diet and things like that, you know, saying such and such was natural, so it must be better, it must be healthier. But, you know, our prehistoric ancestors were also dropping dead at 50 as well, you know. It wasn't common to live, you know, past 30s or 40s. I think it makes sense that evolutionary psychology would be a field of research. I think it's a bit too flimsy to have any social utility. I don't think it holds much stock as far as how the modern world operates. I think more of the popularity of evolutionary psychology, of course, is that it validates certain narratives about gender, and it is used to justify and promote sexist ideas and misinformation. So yeah, not much of science in my book, guesswork at best. It doesn't seem to use the scientific method in obtaining data or forming ideas.